All to the second meeting of President Biden's Export Council. I'm Mark Ein, the chairman of the PEC, and it's a pleasure to be back here with all of you. We have a full agenda, so I'm going to be brief, and we can quickly get to the substance of today's meeting. Today's meetings and our recommendations and the reconvening of this council are terrific examples of the profound power of bringing the public and private sectors together to work for the benefit of our country. Our council is comprised of outstanding private sector leaders from corporate America, labor, academia, along with government officials who closely collaborate with members of the Department of Commerce and other parts of the federal government in our work. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the work today. We have a lot of members of the administration, and rather than name them all, most are going to have a chance to speak, and they'll be recognized at that time. Also, since our last meeting, we added 2 members to the PEC, and I'd like to thank them for joining us, for their work to date, and for joining us today. Keisha Bottoms. Keisha, there you are. And Shamina Singh. Thank you both for joining our council. In the 5 months since we last met, our PEC members, their teams, and the team from the Commerce Department have worked extremely hard to come up with 3 terrific recommendations that we will consider today. These 3 recommendations address 2 of the largest and most foundational sectors of the U.S. economy, manufacturing and agriculture, as well as one of the most important emerging industries, climate and clean tech. Each of these letters has been extremely well thought through and contains substantive proposals that we hope will be valuable tools for the administration in their work both at home and as they travel around the world. I look forward to deliberating the recommendations today and welcome what I'm sure will be a robust discussion. As we thought about how to frame today's meeting, the words that came to mind were perfect timing. Our first recommendation on clean tech and climate solutions comes the day before the world meets in the UAE for COP28, where the U.S. government will send over 500 representatives, its largest delegation ever, which, by the way, is fitting for an administration that has made the largest investments and by far the largest all-of-government commitment to clean tech and climate solutions. This COP delegation includes 3 undersecretaries from the Commerce Department and over a dozen other people. And I know that they believe our proposals will be very helpful to have in hand for their work over there. Our second recommendation on agriculture comes as the United States has lost market share for global agriculture exports over the last few years. In 2023, we are experiencing a 9% decline in the value of U.S. food and agricultural exports and a 19% decline in the volume of major bulk commodity exports. Agriculture and related industries represent approximately 5.4% of U.S. GDP and 10.5% of U.S. employment. Ag exports alone are a $200 billion critical piece of the U.S. economy. I'm grateful to Beth Ford and her team of Land O'Lakes for making sure that we focus on these issues today. And our third recommendation is a very detailed one on manufacturing exports that comes on the back of historically significant investments by the administration in manufacturing sectors as the result of the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, all of which are tied together with sustainability and inclusivity as primary goals. We have only 90 minutes for today's meeting, and I know a lot of people want to talk. So I ask everyone to please keep that in mind. Hopefully we can keep to the timing on the agenda. And with that, I'd like to ask my partner and our PEC Vice Chair, Roz Brewer, to make some introductory remarks.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking the tremendous team that's been behind Mark and I in getting this work done. Tricia and her team has made this an easy task for us, but what's most important is the kind of concentration and engagement that we're getting from the PEC members themselves, the alignment, the questions, the sincerity, the time away from your day jobs to make this important to all of us. But I also want to make sure that we recognize that today we are welcomed with so many of our great members of this administration in this room with us. That means that this topic is important and it's relevant and the timing is now. So I appreciate you all being here. We're going to make this an easy lift for you all, but we're going to also make sure that we talk about the important matters. And we're going to make sure that you have the time to get your voices heard and the concerns, because one thing that this president reminds us all of is the work, the execution, the voices, the reality and getting this work done. And so I am deeply appreciative of you all being here. I want to turn it over to Secretary Raimondo for her remarks, and thank you, Secretary Raimondo, for supporting us in this work.
Thank you, Roz. Good morning, everyone. It's a busy time of year. I'm overwhelmed by how many of you made it to DC for this meeting, so I want to say thank you. That's a credit to you and your commitment to the country, but also to Mark and Roz, who have completely breathed life into the PEC. Want to single out Mark as our chair, who's just put so much time and effort and energy into this. Thank you. And Roz, thank you also. It makes a difference. You know, we've all been on these committees before. It can go one of two ways. You can show up, have perfunctory meetings, take a few photos, and move on. Or you can do what Mark and Roz are doing, which is drive an agenda, and that's where this is going. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone for showing up, including my colleagues in the government. I mean, several cabinet members here this morning at a busy time of year for us, so thank you so much. 3 quick things from me, which are, I think, responsive to what I said I would do and what you asked me to do at the first meeting. We had a first meeting, we had a lunch, I talked to each of you, you gave me some feedback. So first, you said that we should get more involved with artificial intelligence, and we've started that. And the Commerce Department is leading the administration's work on artificial intelligence. About 3 weeks ago in the UK, we launched from the Commerce Department the AI Safety Institute. I'll be in touch with each of you and your companies about that. The concept here is that you can only harness the benefit of AI if you first kind of keep a lid on the risk. And the risks are significant and growing, especially national security risks. And so we are standing up in the Commerce Department a permanent new, we're calling it institute, of scientists, academicians, engineers, people from industry to really come up with guardrails and safety protocols so that we develop AI in a way that is safe, but also you're going to be using it in every one of your businesses 10 times more than you already are. And so we're going to make sure that the work we're doing at Commerce is fully integrated with what's happening at the PEC. Secondly, last time, Lisa and I and us talked about how do we get the PEC more involved with our technology efforts and our export controls. There's like tons of press around what the Commerce Department is doing to control semiconductors, cloud computing, AI, biotechnology, et cetera. So I'm very pleased to announce now that we are reconstituting what's called the PEC-C, which Lisa will chair, and we're gonna create a group of people around that. We're going to put out a notice of solicitation for members, so I hope as you learn more about it, some of your companies, we're looking for senior executives and your senior product people. We need the people at the cutting edge of the technology, so government works hand in glove with companies. We need to find that magic line of what we control. We don't want to over-control, because then we deny U.S. companies revenue that you need to grow. But we can't under-control, because then our adversaries get access to our cutting-edge technology and use it against us. So it's the Export Council Subcommittee on Export Administration, PEC-C, and it's in line with the recommendation you gave us last time. We're going to gather insights from the new committee to help us get our export controls to be more effective by having a continuous engagement with industry. And that's the thing I just want to say on this. It's not enough to say we get a piece of intelligence that some equipment has to be controlled, and then we call industry feverishly. We want to have a constant, continuous dialogue with industry so it can be more strategic. Final thing is, last time at this meeting, we talked about the Indo-Pacific. You may have seen that at APEC a couple of weeks ago, we finalized the Indo-Pacific Partnership, which is a 10-year partnership. It's going to be 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 a 10-year partnership. Indo-Pacific Economic Framework as it relates to climate, infrastructure, fair economy, and supply chains. We talked about doing a mission together to the region as a PEC. And so I'm announcing now that I'm going to be leading a presidential mission to the Philippines, I think the second week in March, and then adding a visit to Thailand. I want every one of you to come with me. I realize that may not be possible. Maybe some of you can come for some country, but we're going to do a PEC mission to the Indo-Pacific, Philippines, and Thailand. Tentatively now it's the week of March 11th, and we've already started the planning. So I don't know. I feel like that's pretty good progress in only 2 meetings. Final thing I'll say is this. As I reviewed the materials for this meeting, they were literally night and day compared to the materials from the previous meeting. And that's just a credit to you guys. Like, let's keep going. Concrete, discrete, specific things. So a year from now, we can be like, yeah, we got that done. Feel good about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your follow-up on those items. I know everyone's excited about the trip, and also really grateful for your focus on AI. I was told that you've been called the Steph Curry of AI.
I know.
I'm not sure what that means, but I think it's good.
I asked my husband, I was like, honey, why do they call me Steph Curry? He said, because you're small and you move a lot.
You should take it. That's a good one. And the PECSI and Lisa Dubrow, thank you for agreeing to chair that. I know it's going to be really impactful. So we'll move on to the first recommendation, which is on climate. I've already talked a lot about it. I just want to add, though, that the administration's expansive work here is a perfect example of how they're tying domestic policy to foreign policy, and export policy cuts across all of that. We talked about the large governmental delegation that is the large governmental delegation that is, we talked about the large governmental delegation that is going to COP, but there's also the Chamber of Commerce is bringing 120 climate, tech, and solutions companies to COP2. Before we get to the recommendation, I'm sorry, Jared, we'd like to ask you to say some remarks before we get in the recommendations.
Here I was having such a good time.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. It is great to be here, and just want to really endorse everything Secretary Raimondo said about how important it is to dialogue with industry, and CEA has made a firm commitment to do that, and not just domestically, but internationally as well. It's also the case that when you listen to Gina Raimondo, it's like listening to Mozart. You just get smarter. So it's an extra pleasure to be here. Especially on a morning where we learned that GDP grew 5.2% in the third quarter. It's not going to be the growth rate in the fourth quarter, but it is a notable point regarding forecasts a year ago that assured us we would be in a recession now. The exports, it seems timely to remind us, contributed 0.7% to that growth. So that seemed relevant in a PEC meeting. Imports subtracted 0.7, and that's but zero contribution from a trade balance is actually pretty good. And that's what I wanted to talk about for 3 minutes. I wanted to talk about the administration's views on trade flows, because I think it's important for the PEC, and I think it's something that gets misunderstood. I know in my world, where I engage a lot in outside conversations and media work, there's a sense that the administration is gone protectionist or is insensitive to the importance of that, of trade flows. I want to just try to put a stop to that right here in the context of PEC. We in the Biden administration highly value robust trade flows. We believe we can continue to aggressively pursue the benefits of U.S. worker-centered trade policy without giving up the many and deep benefits of trade. Such benefits include greater supplies of goods and services, lower inflation, more innovation, good jobs for American workers in exporting sectors, foreign direct investment on U.S. soil, and a better chance of reaching our climate goals. We consider the fact that aggregate trade flows have remained robust, at least through 22. In 23, we're seeing, I think, some cyclical actions in that regard. But at least through 22, trade flows have remained robust. We consider that a necessary condition for ample, resilient supply chains, even as the country origins for U.S. imports are diversifying with less reliance on China. At the CEA, we've shown how the unsnarling of global supply chains has contributed to disinflation, delivering, as the President puts it, increased breathing room for families. We've also heightened increased foreign direct investment in new manufacturing plants here in the U.S. in sectors of domestic production consistent with CHIPS and IRA. These flows are consistent with our agenda to boost domestic production of strategically important sectors, most notably semiconductors and clean energy. But to be clear, we expect some degree of import substitution in these areas, including of inputs we've long imported. These investments can help firms meet the domestic content provisions of IRA and CHIPS. At the same time, and this builds on work by Fariha Kamal, who's here today from CEA, by expanding services surpluses, we can both boost exports and lower our trade deficit. We've also clearly elevated both security and resilience risks with regard to some of our trade with China and are acting on these concerns. But here, too, we've been clear to emphasize the narrow, though crucial, national security dimensions to which these restrictions apply. We're actively working with our allies to avoid unreliable dependencies and accelerate the achievement of our mutual goals, including global supply chain early warning systems, anti-corruption initiatives, more frictionless trade and investment, all while prompting strong labor and environmental standards as seen in our pursuit of new measures like the IPEF and the U.S.-Japan Critical Minerals Agreement. Given the current labor landscape in the U.S., it's worth noting that this minerals agreement includes an employer neutrality clause when it comes to union organizing. On this President's watch, every deal we make must uphold our labor standards and support our unions. In other words, our policy in this space, and I'm talking about, again, international trade and trade flows, is best understood as both and. Both increased domestic sourcing from upstream extraction to final reduction and robust trade and investment flows alongside heightened cooperations with our friends and allies with clear standards guiding those efforts. Thank you, and back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Jared. That was terrific. We appreciate being here and appreciate those remarks. And I think what people hear is what we know, again, that all of this is tying domestic policy to foreign policy to economic policy, which all ties to export policy. And we want to do everything we can to support you and the administration with everything we do. So now I'd like to pass it over to Rich Lesser, the global chair of BCG, who's taken the lead for the PEC on climate issues. I know you're hosting a PEC roundtable at COP, which we are grateful for, and you'll lead the discussion now on our climate recommendation.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Secretary Raimondo and Undersecretary Lago, for your continued leadership of the PEC, and as part of the broader efforts of this administration, in particular, your commitment to tackling climate change and advancing U.S. leadership on climate action. On behalf of the PEC, I'm proud to introduce a recommendation, really a set of recommendations, on expanding U.S. exports in clean energy and climate technologies and solutions. As you've both said, this is really a critical moment for this recommendation. We're heading off to COP28, the UN's annual climate conference, which begins tomorrow. This COP is the official stocktake following the Paris Agreement, basically halfway on the road to 2030. And we're going to hear that we're on way too slow a path to reach our goals. But I'm optimistic that we will see progress over the coming weeks on several key topics, including accelerating renewable energy deployment, increasing climate finance, reducing methane emissions, and expanding regenerative agricultural landscapes and sustainable food systems, among other areas. But the need to do more and to go faster remains. The U.S. government has become a leader on climate action with the passage of major climate investments on the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, rejoining the Paris Agreement, setting a bold emissions reduction goal, and its efforts to work with other countries around the world. And while these actions are moving the needle, the U.S. itself only accounts for 11% of global emissions. So action here at home can't solve this global problem alone. The the U.S. has an opportunity to continue and enhance its climate leadership, particularly on clean technologies, to grow U.S. exports and support other countries' actions on climates. The recommendation outlines 7 major areas for the administration to take action, and let me just quickly tick through them. First, accelerating the global climate transition by exporting U.S. sustainable technologies. I mentioned this report at the June PEC, but there was a report from Third Way, Breakthrough Energy, and BCG highlighting there's a significant opportunity for U.S. leadership and export growth in climate technologies such as batteries, hydrogen, clean steel, direct air capture, and CCUS. Second, to position the U.S. as a leader in infrastructure-related decarbonization, supporting the decarbonization of the construction industry, which is a major opportunity for governments, as 40 to 60% of concrete sales and 20 to 30% of construction revenues come from the public sector. U.S. leadership on green procurement, on building codes and standards can support the change on a global scale, creating a role model for other countries to follow. Third, supporting efforts to mobilize climate finance at scale to fully realize the opportunities of a low-carbon transition. The recommendation includes expanding the Export-Import Bank's credit insurance and loan guarantee program and the definition of environmental products and services eligible for policy incentives, as well as swiftly implementing the IRA's guidance on clean energy tax incentives. Fourth, ensuring robust and meaningful implementation of the new IPEF Clean Economy Pillar, which is very exciting. As this pillar moves towards implementation, we recommend leveraging public-private partnerships across countries to advance progress and monitoring commitments to ensure a level playing field. Fifth, elevating the role of the World Trade Organization in addressing climate-related trade issues. We provided several specific recommendations to ensure ongoing U.S. efforts at the WTO to lower barriers to export of clean technologies and create a more level playing field for businesses around the world. Sixth, to recognize the role of digital technologies to achieve real sustainability progress. We recommend encouraging companies to leverage digital technologies that can help to track and accelerate emissions reductions both within their organizations and across their supply chains. If we don't take a supply chain focus to tracking and reporting emissions, we will not be able to make the progress that we need to on decarbonization. And finally, but very importantly, ensuring a just energy transition. This energy transition will impact communities in different ways, and we support the administration's commitment to ensuring it moves forward in as just a way as possible. We recommend a set of actions for government agencies and U.S. companies to help support knowledge sharing and capacity building in communities and in countries around the world. This recommendation was truly a collaborative effort, and so thank you to all of the members and their teams who contributed to it. I want to open the floor now to others who want to speak to the recommendation. First, we have Brett Isaac, Executive Chairman of Navajo Power, then Patrick Murphy, then Sharmina Singh, and then the floor is open to others. So, Brett?
Thank you. Yate, good morning, everybody. My name is Brett Isaac. I'm a founder and executive chairman of Navajo Power. Really speaking to the recommendation, you know, we appreciate the inclusion of this idea around local consultation, working to really tailor policy to fit, you know, place-based application. We feel just transition as a word means a lot more when it's deployed effectively where it's actually being demanded in these communities that are asking for progress, but also protection. And so continuing forward in advancing American interest in the technology development, as well as, you know, shoring up all of our interests, also means protecting our natural resources, protecting our relatives, and protecting our communities from things that could be harmful and kind of left out of policy and out of those conversations. And so, you know, from a recommendation point, being able to understand that there is a tailored need for different communities in different parts of the country to really effectively be able to do these things in locally discussed matters. So I appreciate the recommendations of the members here, as well as the continued support from the administration in carrying out these duties.
Patrick?
Great, thank you. I'm just going to take a second to talk about construction a little bit. You pointed it out, so thank you for that. I'm sure most of you know these figures, but it's pretty staggering, so I want to reiterate it. 43% of all CO2 emissions come from the built environment, right? Cement itself is around 8% of all global emissions, right? If cement were a country, it'd be the 4th largest polluter in the world, right? That's staggering. And based on some of the projections that we've seen, we're projected to build the equivalent of a New York City every month for the next 40 years, right? So think about that. If we keep things the same, that's a lot of concrete, that's a lot of steel, that's a lot of continued pollution and CO2 emissions in the world. So the good news is there are new alternatives being presented out there, and my background is in the construction world. But it's really, really slow to be adopted. And in fact, there was been actually numerous studies. Austin Goolsbee did one recently showing that from the mid-1970s until today, there's been a 0% increase in productivity in construction, right? Every other industry is basically 2x, 3x, 4x, et cetera. So there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. And I think this is a great opportunity for this committee and a lot of folks in this room to help focus on some of the innovation that's out there. One of the real problems is how long it takes for these new technologies to get through the system. And it's good because it's life safety and we have to respect that and applaud that. But some of the green cements and the green steels and the carbon capture cement have started to make some inroads. But there's other technologies out there. There are composites and there's recycled materials and there's 3D printing, and right? And there's all sorts of new things that we've been reading about. But being someone that's in the industry, it's really tough to get those things implemented. So I think there's some opportunities not only to help our footprint here domestically with the regulatory environment, but also be a leader in exporting these technologies, because there's some great ones that are coming up, you know, that through what I'm seeing in a lot of these events that I see and that I'm involved in. So have a lot of ideas to talk about and continue reducing our footprint in the construction and built environment. So I hope we take a minute to think about that and expand. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shamina Singh, and I'm president of MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. Really delighted to be here, and thank you, Secretary Raimondo, for your leadership on all of these issues. I just had a couple of points to offer in terms of the connection between the sustainability and climate recommendations and the linkage to financial inclusion and financial services, because it also means it's the connection between climate change and job creation. And this is where MasterCard has done a ton of work, because 10 years ago, we made a commitment to bring 1 billion people into the formal financial system. What we've learned over those 10 years is actually 80% of the people who are still financially excluded in the world are in climate vulnerable countries. And so we see a direct connection between digital and financial inclusion access and the jobs and the abilities of countries and communities to actually transition to and adapt to climate change. And so my comment I just wanted to offer is that as we do the work of exporting and recommending trade agreements and the energy efficiencies and all of the great work that's coming out of this administration, to recognize and remember that if 98% of funds are going to climate mitigation, which is extremely important, only 2% of funds are going to adaptation and resilience. And unless we really start thinking hard about what's happening to people, mostly women, on the ground who are leading the climate transition, we're going to end up in a situation where not only do we have climate instability, we have economic uncertainty, which, as we also know, is also a national security issue. So just wanted to point out the connection between digital, and really appreciate the inclusion of digital economy and digital work as part of the sustainability letter, and then to also acknowledge that I couldn't not say anything about Scott Nathan, Jay Shambal, Owen here representing pieces of the government that we have worked with in various countries to actually leverage your resources and capabilities to do really good work around financial inclusion around the world. So thank you.
Anyone else want to have a comment on this?
Carlos Monhay from the Department of Transportation. I want to thank you for your focus on clean transportation technologies. As folks know, we've got a lot of money to spend on this issue, $2 billion from the IRA to invest in low-carbon building materials. We got 40,000 projects that we funded in the last 2 years. Transportation is the largest source of CO2 emissions in the U.S. As we build these projects, we want to drive down the CO2 emissions. We also the life cycle emissions of those projects, and also make sure that American companies are at the forefront. We also have $7.5 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law to install EV chargers. The first of those are going to hit the ground anytime now. It's a question of which state. Also, thank you for your emphasis on the IPEF. We see that as not only a great way to expand exports, but also to make progress on the harder to decarbonize sectors, including shipping and aviation. So really grateful for these recommendations and really grateful to be at this table.
Yes.
Hi, Catherine Ty, U.S. Trade Rep. I also wanted to thank you for this set of recommendations. They're very thoughtful, and I have a lot of thoughts on the recommendations. I think if I just limit myself to two. One of them is just to highlight something else that we're doing within the administration that I think it is well worth all of you to have in your minds. That's not in this list, but is actually very, very relevant to the sustainability, the climate pieces, which is the global steel arrangement that we've been negotiating. So this exercise is based out of the 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum. And the administration has been working for the last 2 years, first with the European Union, to convert essentially a national security set of restrictions to defend U.S. steel and aluminum production and our jobs here, to modernize it essentially to address both fair trade and fair production, but also importantly, clean production and clean trade. So the goal of this negotiation has been to create an arrangement that will, when accomplished, incentivize both fair trade in steel and aluminum and also clean trade and production. And I think this goes a lot to the point on infrastructure and construction, which is there is so much demand in terms of our continuously modernizing world for construction for these strategic materials. And yet, these are two of the most, along with cement and others, the most carbon-intensive industrial sectors. What we are really trying to do, and I know steel and aluminum might not immediately seem relevant to your business sectors, but I wanted to highlight for you that when we do succeed on this, the idea is then to bring in more and more like-minded countries and then to create what will be a global arrangement. What we're trying to do is to create a new paradigm for trade in critical sectors and critically carbon-intensive sectors that will create incentives for cleaner and cleaner production and fair production and trade. So I wanted to highlight that because I think that if you think about it as just a steel and an aluminum exercise, you may be missing the import of what we're trying to do, which is to drive new incentives and new trade models. The second piece that I wanted to highlight for you is related. So to your point on elevating the WTO as a forum for driving trade-based solutions for climate, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and it is something that we're very focused on. I just wanted to make a recommendation to your recommendation on the environmental goods and services piece. I agree. I think that this is an area where we should focus. The issue is I would suggest thinking beyond just the ITA as a model but also incorporating some of the concepts that we brought into, for example, the global arrangement negotiations in terms of looking at not just a product's contribution to climate friendliness, but also how that product is made and what the carbon footprint of its own production process is. And I think, we were informed by not just our steel and aluminum work, but the challenge that we have with solar panels, the need to, and the desire to deploy them quickly, but also a recognition that we have vulnerabilities in terms of concentration of production and supply. And also where most solar panels are produced right now, they are still produced using coal-fired power. And so it's that life cycle concept that we're trying to inject into the conversations at the WTO and elsewhere so that we're thinking more holistically about sustainability. We really appreciate your recommendations.
So just two quick reactions. First, on your point about Europe, I spent a good chunk of my time in Europe talking to European business leaders. They and American business leaders, I think, are so hoping that Europe and the U.S. can work collaboratively to achieve both goals, to take a lot of what Europe's pushing on carbon border adjustment mechanisms and other things, and be able to implement them in ways that can allow both for fair opportunities for everyone, but also accelerate decarbonization, and with as little bureaucratic overhead as can be done, which is not easy. I don't want to minimize, but that's on many, many business leaders' minds on both continents. And second, we will take your input. I think part of what we wanted to highlight on, I think, was our 5th or 6th recommendation about using digital and AI is the need to do full life cycle tracking of carbon footprints of products as being incredibly important. And that includes the products that are in the decarbonization space. So that's a great input, and we'll take it on and adjust as appropriate.
So, Rich, I think we'd like to hear if there's any other PEC members and then adopt it and then hear from the other governmental officials, if there's any other PEC members. Okay. So with that, thank you for that excellent discussion, everyone. I'd like to move to endorsing this recommendation. Does anyone have any objections to the recommendation? Hearing none, I proclaim the recommendation adopted by the President's Export Council. Oh, good.
I'm going to engrave that for you.
Yeah, thank you. Now we'd like to hear from other government officials about this, Secretary.
So, great job, really great job. A few things. One, we're excited for COP. The Commerce Department's sending the biggest delegation ever to COP, led by Marisa Lago, our Undersecretary of ITA. Thank you for inviting us to the roundtable. We have hundreds of U.S. clean tech companies going, so really fired up about that. Secondly, Rich mentioned it, but just to underscore it. So in the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, we were able to finalize with 13 countries in the Indo-Pacific the climate and infrastructure agreements, which is exciting, to have agreement as among 14 U.S. and 13 countries around how we're going to work together to achieve our climate goals, how to make sure that infrastructure investments in those countries build infrastructure in a way consistent with climate goals, et cetera. So now we have sign-off at the government levels. Now we do the implementation, which is, the fun and exciting part. And that means that's why we're doing this trade mission next March. I think the PEC is extremely well positioned to help us implement as against this climate agreement. There's a massive appetite in Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia for U.S. capital, for U.S. know-how. They've agreed to high standards. They've signed up to climate goals. They want our capital, and they want our expertise. And Scott Nathan's been an amazing partner on this from the DFC. So just to say, now that we've done our part in finalizing the government-to-government agreements, we'll get to the implementation phase, and it fits perfectly with your recommendations.
Thanks, Gina. And thanks for calling out Scott. I'd like to call him now Scott Nathan, who's the CEO of the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark, my good friend, Secretary Raimondo, and colleagues. It's great to be here with all of you, and I'm delighted to be able to react to the recommendations and in the process tell you a little bit about the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. I'll just take a few minutes to do so. You know, Congress created DFC 4 years ago based on the idea that the United States needed to show up in the developing world and offer an alternative to what we're seeing from our strategic competitors. DFC partners with the private sector and mobilizes private capital to advance our development and foreign policy objectives. Our financing must be sustainable, appropriate for local laws and conditions, based on commercial rationale, and it goes to projects that are high quality and meet the highest environmental, labor, social, and transparency standards. DFC is founded on the idea that private actors, companies and project developers, often are best positioned to deliver solutions to development challenges and lift people out of poverty, and there's no area where I believe that's more important than in relation to addressing climate change. This administration is making investments into the development of global infrastructure, physical, digital, financial, that is necessary to sustain modern commerce and promote economic growth and stability. And just one quick example, last week DFC announced a $553 million loan in Sri Lanka to build out a new container terminal in the Port of Colombo. This is critical for the free flow of trade. This is the busiest trade route in the world, and it promotes jobs and makes development impact at the same time. We're also focused on addressing some of the developing world's greatest challenges. So that's food insecurity, global health crises, and of course, climate change. Many of the countries where we work are the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. DFC is leaning into this challenge and pursuing projects in rural electrification, desalination, sanitation, adaptation, debt for nature swaps, and much more. And we're working on the diversification of supply chains for renewable energy. We can't be dependent on just one country or one company for the goods we need for the industries of the future. Over the last 18 months, we've provided nearly $1 billion in financing to 2 different projects to manufacture solar cells and panels in India in an energy-efficient manner. And of course, the clean energy transition will also require more critical minerals and the diversification of their processing and supply chains. We're working hard on this challenge. We announced last month a $150 million deal in Mozambique for the production of graphite. Some of that production will eventually go to a facility here at home in Louisiana that's supported by a Department of Energy loan. We have other investments in cobalt, nickel, rare earths, and we're actively looking for more. It was great to see in the manufacturing recommendation extensive commentary about critical minerals. We look forward to working with all of you on that. In the last year, we've increased our involvement in climate finance. We did $3.7 billion of climate finance. That's up from just $500 million 2 years ago. We're proud of that. As I started, we're trying to show up around the developing world, and we look forward to working with all of you to make sure that we do that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Scott, and thanks for those words, and thanks for your leadership of the DFC. I know how passionate you are and how tirelessly you are working, traveling all over the world, as you said, just showing up, and the significant impact you're having. So thanks for all of that, Scott. Next, I'd like to see Assistant Secretary of Energy, Andrew Light. Would like to comment next.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it. I very much appreciate the recommendations from the Council. These are absolutely terrific. They're exactly the kind of concrete recommendations that the entire U.S. government, and especially my boss, Jennifer Granholm, loves to see. Just a couple quick comments. One, Rick, couldn't agree more on one of the points that you underscored, which is while there was a tremendous, especially now with the tools that we have through IRA, enormous opportunities for foreign direct investment in the United States, there is so much more out there in the rest of the world, because that's where the growth is happening. That's where all these cities are being built. This is where it's all happening. In 2015, when I was helping to negotiate the Paris Agreement in the Obama administration at the State Department, the International Finance Corporation came out with a study that said, just look at the top dozen developing countries and their commitments under the Paris Agreement. In 2015, created a $23 trillion investment opportunity in the world. That's an old number. So the number is far larger now, and it's been duplicated in many other places. And the Department of Energy, along with the rest of the U.S. government, is absolutely committed to this idea that we need to open up the world for competitive U.S. goods and services in clean energy technology. And that is absolutely fundamental. And we need to beat our competitors there. Not only because it's good to beat our competitors, but also because some of them are selling really, really bad things still to this day. And Jared underscored this. And so I think that this is absolutely something that we take to heart, and we'll do that. Patrick, couldn't agree more on the foot stomp what you were saying on concrete itself. I'll say that this is absolutely essential. We very much appreciate these parts of the recommendations. Just one quick note on that, just a little shout out to DOE. Even before Bill and Ira, Secretary Granholm started something called the Earthshots Initiative. There are now 9 of them, where we went through sector by sector by sector, hydrogen, advanced geothermal, everything, like trying to drive down the cost of these next generation technologies so that we can be more competitive in the world. And one of them is called the Industrial Heat Shot. So our contribution, at least on this, is to try to reduce emissions in the creation of concrete and steel and chemicals and others 85% and make that cost competitive. Because I agree with you, Patrick, like these alternatives have been out there for a long time. I've written about them for decades, but they're still, a couple shelves away. And we need to bring them to the fore so that you and other manufacturers can grab them and use them in a cost-competitive way. The last thing I want to say is just one note on how we're trying to use and leverage the work that we're doing with other countries to help to create these markets. So one of the things that the Secretary created as part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure is something called the Net Zero World Initiative at the Department of Energy. We created a consortium with 9 of our sister agencies, including State and Commerce and Transportation, XM, DFC, others, and a consortium of 10 of our national labs to create comprehensive, soup-to-nuts plans to help countries to get to net zero by 2050 and create the investment strategies to attract private and public capital to get them there. We're working with 9 countries so far, big ones, Indonesia, Argentina, Chile, Nigeria, Egypt, others. And so far, in only 2 years, we've managed to create out of that process 30 implementable policies, which have already attracted $10 billion in outside investment. Much of that is U.S. investment. And so I think that that's that sort of government-enabled, private sector enacted strategy we need to do. We see it resonating with this letter, but there are a lot of great points in this we're going to take back to DOE and work with our other agencies and improve the work that we're already doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks, Andrew. Any other government officials want to speak on this? Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
so on behalf of Secretary Blinken and the State Department, let me just say the one thing we don't think a lot about is how to do the implementation. And the State Department has 80,000 people and 200 installations around the world. And we've been working on climate negotiations for a long time, but we haven't necessarily trained our diplomats to do the kind of implementation that you're talking about here, what Andrew just talked about really kind of blowing open some markets, competing with adversaries, and working with the private sector, doing the tough negotiations. So really proud to report that under the Secretary's modernization agenda, we are now training, we have a separate track for diplomats that want to be experts in climate diplomacy. And it'll only be a few years before we have a few hundred people who have gone through the program to do the kind of negotiations that you're talking about, to really up our game and represent all of you in faraway places that are being impacted by what Bill Burns likes to call the problems without passports, the climate change that is impacting our national security and our economic security in so many places around the globe. So it's a little, about the skill set that you want our government to have, and I want you to know we're working hard on that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I would just say that thank you for all the government officials for your comments. One of the things that we hope to do next year is to make sure that we're properly following up on the execution of these recommendations so that they have real impact. So I'd invite all of us to figure out how we best collaborate next year to turn these excellent recommendations into real tangible impact together. So with that, Roz, I'd like to hand it over to you to lead our second recommendation.
Thank you, Mark. So I'd like to set up the discussion around the support and recommendation for agriculture in our work. So first of all, the charter of the President's Export Council explicitly identifies an objective that the Council report to the President on its recommendations for expanding U.S. exports and to examine the needs of business, industry, and agriculture to expand their efforts. With the current future trade deficit in food and agricultural products, heightened by the recent political unrest and the experience of COVID, actions are needed now to support and expand opportunities for U.S. exports to include agriculture that supports the health of this sector and the U.S. economy. I also note that the PEC received a letter signed by 35 agricultural groups encouraging adopting of an agriculture recommendation, underscoring the wide support for action to promote U.S. agriculture exports across the ag community. As we discuss this subject, it is important to highlight that the inaugural meeting of the White House Council on Supply Chain Resilience took place just yesterday, and there were a number of supply chain-related announcements that aligned with PEC recommendations that you're about to hear. So in particular, the announcement of the Supply Chain Data Summit. Supply Chain Data Summit will convene a diverse array of public and private stakeholders at a Supply Chain Data and Analytics Summit, and that will take place in 2024. The event will gather expert input to inform supply chain risk assessment models and tools and facilitate expanded sharing of data and analytic capabilities. Now, I'd like to welcome the comments from Beth Ford. Beth, through her leadership as CEO of Land O'Lakes, a $14 billion agriculture cooperative, which we all should understand that this is farmer-based, right? And so that's important for the work that Beth has done. Beth has led significant innovation in ag and has been quoted as saying, the biggest challenges facing American farmers are policy uncertainty, weather, the changing climate, and the lack of broadband access. And I want to highlight that piece because we keep hearing that, so much so that Beth leads the work around the American Connection, recognizing the inclusion of broadband in ag. And this is a privately funded organization. It's truly relevant and aligned to the mission of PEC. So Beth, thank you for your work, and the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chairman Ein, Vice Chair Brewer, Secretary Raimondo, Secretary Vilsack, and anybody else that I need to talk about. And by the way, Land O'Lakes, as noted, is a farmer-owned cooperative, and we're in 10,000 rural communities. So we see the impacts very closely. I want to talk about trade today, and there are a number of other recommendations. As you say, it's really a tapestry of investments that are necessary to protect our global food supply chain and to protect rural America. I appreciate the opportunity to bring forward this proposal on behalf of the agricultural sector, which I'm so proud to represent. Our industry is a broad and critical subset of our economy, from the American farmer to businesses such as the cooperative I lead to the rural communities that both support and benefit from the success and strength of our food supply. Trade is integral to their success. That's why I am deeply grateful to this administration for convening this important group of government and industry to support the American farmer, the agricultural industry, and to support growth for jobs and the economy. This proposal is supported industry-wide with deep consultation and input from the agricultural organizations representing all 50 states, as well as across important commodities in global trade. 35 organizations authored and signed a letter in support of these proposals, which we will submit for the record at this meeting. Trade is increasingly important to the U.S. ag sector, with 1 in 3 rows of corn, 1 in 4 rows of soybeans, over 27% of pork production, and 18% of dairy production being exported, and that's amongst all other commodities. The food and ag sector exports about 20% of total production. Strong agricultural exports also support the U.S. economy. U.S. agriculture, food, and related industries contributed 5.4%, or $1.264 trillion to the U.S. GDP. It also provided 10.5% of U.S. employment, or 21.1 million full and part-time jobs in 2021. These numbers also prove that ag trade and the jobs it creates not only secures the food supply, but also bolsters the rural communities on which we all depend. In 2022, American food and agriculture exports totaled nearly $200 billion, providing jobs and economic opportunity throughout the supply chain in every corner and coast of the country. And yet, in 2023, we are experiencing a 9% decline in the value of U.S. food and agricultural exports and a 16% decline in volume. And from USDA's most recent quarterly outlook for the U.S. agricultural trade, the ag trade deficit is forecasted to rise by 45% in fiscal 2024. The latest forecast by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the 2023 marketing year predicts a food and agricultural trade deficit of $17 billion. This is a stark contrast to the United States' historical trade surplus in agricultural exports, averaging $12.5 billion over the past 10 years. This proposal puts us in position to reclaim and retain our lead. These recommendations focus on a continuation of the United States leadership amidst a dynamic and disrupted global environment. First, the PEC urges increased collaboration within the administration to develop recommendations to diversify sourcing and to incentivize cost-effective U.S. production of ingredients. This includes fertilizers, vitamins, and chemicals. These efforts would protect against supply shocks that could threaten domestic production. Second, the PEC recommends the establishment of a robust agricultural trade agenda. This would counter recent trends of agricultural trade exports falling behind. It would also enhance the ability of American producers to gain market access and maintain competitiveness. We ask the administration to expand domestic trade promotion programs for traditional and specialty crops, recommit to comprehensive trade agreements where possible, and eliminate tariff and non-tariff trade barriers within priority regions and markets. Third, the PEC urges the U.S. to enforce existing trade agreements, including the provisions surrounding tariff and non-tariff barriers. We also recommend the administration strengthen and modernize the World Trade Organization dispute resolution process and use it to improve market access for U.S. agricultural goods. Fourth and finally, the PEC recommends the U.S. government lead on international sustainability and climate efforts with a unified message. We ask that this message focus on voluntary, incentive-based programs to support growth, support climate-smart agricultural practices, and keep food accessible. American farmers and ranchers, workers, and businesses across the agricultural sector are the best in the world. I look forward to working alongside the Council and the administration to support them. And now I will turn to Secretary Vilsack for any comments he may wish to make.
First of all, Beth, thank you very much for your leadership, in not only the dairy industry, but also in agriculture generally. This is a tough conversation for me, because on the one hand, you've heard some statistics that are a bit concerning. On the other hand, it is important to point out that the last 3 years have been the best 3 years in agricultural exports in the history of the country. Let me repeat that. It's the best 3 years in agricultural exports.
I'm not sure that's helpful in this discussion.
No, the point of this is not only were the best 3 years of agricultural exports, they were also the best 3 years of agricultural income in the history of the country. Having said that, there are two American agricultures. And much of what you've talked about really deals with production agriculture, large-scale production agriculture, who are the beneficiaries of agricultural exports and clearly need those exports to remain profitable. However, those large-scale production facilities represent roughly 7.5% of all American farms. These are farms that sell more than $500,000 in product every year. 7.5%, 150,000 out of about 2 million farms. They secured 89% of that record income. So as the Secretary of Agriculture, I'm dealing with two issues here. I'm dealing with expanding exports to encourage and involve production agriculture as a profitable venture, but also trying to maintain opportunities for small and mid-sized producers. And we think we've developed a framework to try to address this imbalance that exists. And that is a significant challenge for rural America. So let me address the export aspect of the comments today. But before I do, you didn't ask me to comment on the previous recommendations, but I would point out that we also have the Forest Service under our jurisdiction, and we're developing cross-laminated timber as a substitute or additional opportunity in the construction business. It can be made from diseased wood that we have in our forests, and rather than seeing them burn up in catastrophic fires, we want to help Representative Murphy and his construction folks to be able to build high-rise structures with wood. Tremendous opportunity, and America is leading in this effort. It also will respond to disaster. When we talk about construction, we often talk about growing communities, but we also have to recognize with climate change, we have communities that have been devastated that have to be rebuilt. And we're working right now with Hawaii to try to see if we could use cross-laminated timber in construction of rebuilding their housing stock that was destroyed recently. So an amazing opportunity. Let me respond to the recommendations. First of all, we totally agree with the recommendations. We think they're strong recommendations, and in fact, we're already taking action to implement them. We recently announced a $1.2 billion commitment from the Commodity Credit Corporation to expand opportunities to diversify our reach. The sad reality for American agriculture is that we've put too much emphasis on a handful of markets in terms of agricultural exports. Roughly, our top 4 or 5 markets basically are responsible for nearly 60% of our exports. And so we believe it's important and necessary for us to figure out ways in which we can expand the number of market opportunities and increase our commitment to those that are not in the top 4 or 5. So this $1.2 billion commitment, about $1.1 billion is going to be utilized to expand assistance to our cooperators to be able to go out in these new market opportunities and to invest and to provide promotions and presence to encourage American agriculture opportunities there. Today we are announcing specifically the first $300 million of that tranche to be allocated, and the conditions that we've placed on the first $300 million is that they can be invested anywhere but in the top 4 agricultural markets. So this is a specific response to the recommendation. We did not exclude Japan just simply because we saw a significant decline in market share in Japan, so we want to make sure that we are stepping up our game in a place where we think there's opportunity. We also have carved out within that resource a specific specialty crop initiative that is designed to enhance and encourage expanded specialty crop exports, and we've earmarked a specific sum for Africa. We think there's a tremendous opportunity there that we have to maximize. You'll see significant expansion of trade missions, and in fact, you'll see them in areas that are not necessarily in our top 4 or 5 areas. Next year, we'll have trade missions to India, Colombia, Vietnam, and Morocco. This adds to the trade missions this year in Malaysia, Chile, Panama, and Angola. So there is an opportunity here in an effort to try to expand trade missions and trade shows. We totally agree with you that we need to have a robust trade agenda, and my good partner down at the other end of the table, Ambassador Tai, she's done a tremendous job of understanding and helping us break down barriers. We've seen barriers broken down for products in India, Senegal, Canada, Japan, Vietnam, and Mexico just in the last year. We're going to continue that effort. Certainly appreciate the recommendations on the WTO. We obviously are very supportive of that. We understand the importance of enforcing existing trade agreements, which is why this administration, unlike previous administrations, is in fact taking action. It's taken action within the context of the USMCA, both in Canada and in Mexico, Canada dairy, Mexico and biotechnology. We're currently encouraging our friends in Chile to recognize the importance of the organic equivalency agreements on the organic side. So there is an effort, and will continue to be a robust effort at enforcing existing trade agreements. And let me just say, I think we are leading in terms of international sustainability efforts. There is no government that has provided the resources on a voluntary, incentive-based, and market-driven effort to support climate-smart agriculture than this country. This administration has created what we refer to as the Climate Smart Commodity Partnership Initiative. We've invested $3 billion in 141 projects. Every state has numerous projects. Over 90 commodities are involved in this effort. 175 climate smart practices are being incented. As Beth well knows, Truterra, which is part of Land O'Lakes, is heavily engaged and involved in an effort on the dairy side. These projects, we are paying farmers to embrace climate smart practices. We are creating new market premiums for those commodities being produced. And we are measuring and monitoring and verifying and reporting and will report the results of these activities, not just to the domestic market, but to the international world by virtue of our International Climate Hub, where we are focusing on innovations within the U.S. that support climate-smart agriculture. We think there's an opportunity here not only to improve income, but also to obviously do right by the climate. We also have engaged with the UAE in an international effort to form what we refer to as the Aim for Climate Initiative. We started with a small number of countries committed to this effort to promote and accelerate innovation in the sustainability space. As a result, as of today, there are over 500 partners. We've seen nearly $13 billion of commitments from the partners. There are now over 50 innovation sprints that are being embraced by the Aim for Climate effort, and we launched the International Climate Hub as a way of providing additional information to the world about these opportunities. And finally, the United States has taken leadership on the Global Methane Pledge. Here at USDA, we are investing $900 million in roughly 92 specific projects focused on fertilizer, creating additional fertilizer here in the U.S., finding synthetic ways to produce it without the climate challenges that it currently presents, and also looking at alternative ways to utilize greater ag productivity with less fertilizer and in some cases with no fertilizer. So that $900 million initiative being funded by the Commodity Credit Corporation, it started out as a $250 million initiative, but because of the interest here in the U.S., we've expanded it to $900 million. So I think you can see we take these recommendations quite seriously, and we are already implementing them in a very serious and significant way.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us, and we're grateful for your comments and also your long-standing leadership, so thank you very much, and for already working with us to implement these recommendations. So I'd like to move to endorsing this recommendation. Does anyone have any objections? Hearing none, I proclaim this recommendation adopted by the President's Export Council. Okay, moving on to our last recommendation on manufacturing. I'm very pleased to briefly introduce it. Manufacturing still remains the backbone of the U.S. economy, and like the others, this recommendation is a very detailed one with a number of specific proposals designed to ensure that industry and government work closely together to support the strength and growth of this critical sector. We've already talked about the historically significant investments in manufacturing by this administration as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and the Infrastructure Investment Act. But those investments have also been meaningfully supported by the agencies such as Scott's at the DFC, the Exim Bank, and also the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, and we're grateful for all of their leaders who are with us here today. I'd like to now pass it over to Mike Roman, the President and CEO of 3M, who will lead this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Raimondo, it's a pleasure to be back in D.C. today for our President's Export Council meeting. I'm proud of the work that we as a council have done to build on the platform that we established in May and are ready to deliver 3 robust recommendations on climate, manufacturing, and agriculture. And it's my pleasure to now present a summary of our recommendation on manufacturing. American manufacturers are prepared to innovate to meet the economic, climate, and geopolitical challenges that our country faces today. And the administration can serve a critical role in advancing these issues by both removing barriers and providing incentives to maximize these opportunities. Our letter on manufacturing is composed of 4 main pillars. First, enhancing U.S. leadership in addressing global trade barriers. Second, supporting resilient supply chains. Third, leveraging existing trade agreements. And fourth, preparing the workforce for the future. First, Madam Secretary, your U.S. commercial service officers provide an invaluable service to U.S. industry, including small businesses, in accessing local markets. To further enhance U.S. leadership in addressing global trade barriers, these efforts should be further encouraged, especially in growing markets where American solutions are needed, such as the Indo-Pacific, and should be leveraged as appropriate across all related agencies. Our second recommendation addresses resilient supply chains, including access to critical minerals and materials, semiconductors, domestic transmission capacity, and supporting digital trade. In particular, I'd like to highlight the importance of critical minerals and critical materials, which allow U.S. companies in multiple sectors to maximize the benefits of both the CHIPS Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Ensuring the availability of these materials will enable manufacturers of EVs, semiconductors, and more to achieve their maximum production capacity in the U.S., which ultimately supports exports. In addition, strengthening and expanding the power grid by increasing the availability of transmission capacity will further support the needs of U.S. manufacturers, even as it accelerates the renewable energy sources onto the grid. Our third recommendation centers on leveraging existing trade agreements to ensure they reach their full potential. For instance, the African Growth and Opportunity Act should be renewed to better meet today's challenges, including the adoption of U.S. standards that better ensure the competitiveness of U.S. manufacturers. In addition, as we approach the USMCA 6-year review, we ask that the administration remain in close contact with U.S. stakeholders in all sectors of the economy to ensure the benefits promised by the agreement are fully attained. Finally, as a manufacturer who has focused on workforce development for decades, I'm especially pleased that this letter also calls for steps to take better advantage of and prepare U.S. workforce for the future. We welcome the administration's efforts to bridge the gap in supply and demand for a highly trained workforce, including those needed for clean tech, and encourage this work to continue with the expansion of public-private partnerships. More could be said regarding the specific recommendations that are contained in this letter, but I'll leave it here for now, and I look forward to our discussion and comments from my esteemed PEC colleagues. Thank you very much, and I'll now turn to Lisa Disbrow and then Shamina Singh for their comments. Lisa?
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for leading this recommendation. Secretary Raimondo, thank you for the opportunity to convene today and for all the work you and your team are doing. Well, I support this comprehensive recommendation, and I want to highlight a key section going back to the critical minerals and materials. And this is because it's so important for economic competitiveness and also for military readiness. I was able, in between meetings as we worked this recommendation, to get a good sampling from the defense industrial base, and my comments reflect the input I received from my colleagues there. The United States, as we all know, is very dependent on many critical minerals and strategic materials in the manufacturing of consumer products. This ranges from phones, computers, cars, but also military platforms and equipment. The PEC members share the administration's goals of maintaining a domestic supply of these essential inputs, which will make our economy and our defense industrial base more resilient, but also better postured to expand our exports in the future. Our pending recommendation proposes 4 specific courses of action that I want to go through quickly. First, we recommend a coordinated interagency approach to provide incentives for U.S. allies and partners to align investment strategies for critical mineral supply chains to increase overall production capacity. Second, we recommend stronger U.S. domestic strategies for onshoring solutions for sourcing these critical minerals. For both the international and the domestic strategies, the pending recommendation encourages the administration to focus on the entire process, from mining to end product manufacturing. Third, we recommend continued exploration of new manufacturing approaches. This includes additive manufacturing to reduce cost, but also to enable novel production techniques. We encourage the continued prioritization of investments into the research of advanced alternative materials and recycling technologies with the goal of reducing dependencies on these critical minerals. And I've personally seen from my travels to the defense labs, exciting work on what these kinds of alternative materials can possibly unlock for us. there's also continued congressional interest and interest in other sectors to harness new opportunities from the recycling technologies. Fourth and finally, we recommend the administration continue to align regulatory policies and actions to ensure we can retain domestic production of these critical minerals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you again. Shamina Singh, once more, just wanted to thank my colleagues for accepting our edit to the letter that includes a focus on digital trade and the connection between digital trade and manufacturing. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the need and the connection between data flows, the free flow of data, and the success of manufacturers. We operate a network in over 200 markets, and with over 100 million businesses on our network, many of whom include manufacturers, and data and the free flow of data is a critical part of their success, both here and abroad. I know as the interagency evaluates the future of U.S. digital trade posture, I know the PEC will have ample opportunity to highlight the importance of high standard digital trade rules at the WTO and through the IPEF. And so really thank you for the edit, thank you for your partnership, and look forward to working with everyone here to make this reality.
Thank you, Shamina. Any additional comments from PEC members? Back to you,
Great.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike, for leading that recommendation. I'd like to move to endorsing this recommendation. Does anyone have any objections to the recommendation? Hearing none, I proclaim this third recommendation adopted by the President's Export Council. With that,
You have a very gentle touch.
I'm just like,
Just
proud.
to say thank you to Mike and the team for your work. Two quick things, picking up on your recommendations. One, you commented how supply chain resiliency is critical to export success. The Commerce Department launched in the past few weeks a supply chain center. It's a first of its kind effort in the federal government. It's incredible. If we ever had time, I'd love to demo it to you. We have a great data analytics engine. It's the first time that we can be really granular in going deep into the supply chain. And the hope is that we will use it to be proactive. You know, we are constantly reactive. You know, there's a, I don't know, semiconductor packaging plant that goes down in Malaysia. It puts 10,000 people out of work in the Midwest who are trying to make cars and can't get their access to chips, so we react. But this is about being proactive, seeing ahead so we can predict. So we launched it just a couple weeks ago, has a great team, has a great data analytics engine. I want to follow up with you on that, but it's directly responsive to your point. Second point, you mentioned workforce. Early next year, we're going to be launching a huge workforce effort around the semiconductor initiative. So stay tuned for that. But just think about this, and you're in construction, you can relate to this. Right now, I mean, we have a historically low unemployment rate. Unemployment rate in the building trades is basically zero. Everyone who's a good construction worker can get a job. Same thing in manufacturing, same thing. Just the semiconductor initiative alone, we think will create, you know, probably very quickly about 110,000 construction jobs and a similar number of manufacturing jobs. So 250,000 manufacturing construction new jobs next year. We need to get to work with industry to really train. And so I think you're going to, based on your recommendation, I think you're going to love the work we're doing deeply in partnership with manufacturers to really fundamentally change the way we do worker training in America, which is what I think the moment calls for.
thank you, Gina. Assistant Secretary Light, do you want to comment?
Sure. I'll make three quick comments, one overview, one on domestic activities, and one on international. So I want to drill down on the critical minerals recommendations, which are so welcome and so absolutely essential. Demand growth for critical minerals is going to increase 400 to 600% over the next 3 decades. on the current trajectory of the technologies that we're doing in order to transform the global economy to one that is climate compatible. And that's a lot. And so no one, I think, in their right mind who cares about that global transformation should not be disturbed about the market concentration in critical minerals in the world today. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. And I think no one would rightly want to see the United States or any climate forward-looking clean energy economy to be in the same position with respect to any other country that the Europeans were with respect to Russia on gas before the war started in Ukraine. None of us would want to see that. So it is absolutely essential that we work our way out of this and use every single tool on this. One of my jobs is that I lead the energy negotiations for the United States in the G7 and the G20 tracks. One of my personal victories over the last 3 years is that in the critical minerals paragraph in the G20 communique, in the energy ministerial track, I've managed to get the word sustainable inserted before critical minerals. So sustainable critical mineral supply chains. It has been a pitched battle down to the last second of the negotiations with China to get that one word in. I'm very proud of that. I really worry it's a Pyrrhic victory, however. So a lot rides on whether or not we can implement the kind of recommendations that you're making. So my second point on the domestic side, there's so much that we're doing, Commerce is doing, DOE, others are doing on this issue. One shout out that we think responds to some of your recommendations is DOE's Critical Materials Research Development, Demonstration, and Deployment program, where we're working on diversifying, expanding supply, developing alternatives, recycling, building a circular economy, and many of the other things you're working on, but the recommendations in the letter really help us to focus these efforts. And the last point I want to make is international. I think that between Commerce, State, and DOE, we must be involved in 6 or 7 or 8 international consortiums working on critical minerals. I would just say, for example, the State Department's, the work that Rich and Jose Fernandez have done on the Mineral Security Partnership is really fantastic with respect to actually trying to target private capital to be more competitive with China and others with respect to resources in developing countries in Africa and Latin America and other places. One thing that might have gone below your radar screen, though, that I think that you'll get more attention is the work we've been doing with the International Energy Agency, which you all know is part of the OECD family. It was started 50 years ago by Henry Kissinger as essentially a way to mitigate oil shocks, right? Brought on by, again, concentration of resources at that time in our history. And it's through that we do these collective actions to release oil, or when we see a supply shock. We did 3 of those at the beginning of this administration that to very, very good effect to stabilize supplies. In 2022, Secretary Granholm chaired the last ministerial meeting of the International Energy Agency, and she said, and IEA is modernized greatly. We all sort of look at the World Energy Outlook, anyone who follows energy as a kind of a Bible we put on our desks every single year, which gives us all the data that we need. But she said critical minerals now need to be at the heart of the IEA. And through that, we started a number of different programs, including experimenting with the Department of Defense and Department of State and other partners on experimental stockholding, on recycling programs, and other things to create a mineral security partnership that hopefully will respond to some of these things. But I think we're going to take your recommendations back to that group of 31 countries and try to use them, again, as a template to improve that program moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Light, for those comments and all of your work. Thank you. Ellie Collison, hi.
Hi, Mark. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
On behalf of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, I want to thank the PEC for your recommendations. My name is Ellie Collinson. I am the Deputy Director and Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. In your last meeting, our Director, Ino Ebong, was representing the agency. She regrets that she wasn't able to join you today, but I think she will see many of you at COP next week. I wanted to just touch on a couple of quick points that were raised throughout the course of this conversation. As you probably recall, the U.S. government oversees project preparation agency, that's us. USTDA places U.S. companies at the forefront of our mission to develop sustainable infrastructure in the world's emerging markets. That's the middle and the low-income markets. Our grant funding for project preparation is critical to defining the requirements for infrastructure projects and also attracting the overseas investments that Scott and others at the table have been discussing in order to procure technology from the United States. U.S. companies perform our assistance, which also enhances our global competitiveness. I want to share just quickly 4 things. So first, you highlighted that DFC, USTDA, and XM need to work more closely together on issues pertaining to climate, and I want to say thank you for acknowledging that and for the feedback. We do, in fact, work very closely and regularly in terms of identifying, structuring, and closing infrastructure deals cross-cutting, but also especially in the climate space. And we do this coordination at every level of our agency, so I think we're going to focus on making sure we're highlighting that more prominently and calling attention to that interagency partnership. Secondly, we talked about Indo-Pacific regional issues here, and I just want to share a couple of highlights for you. Our support for U.S. companies has grown exponentially in the region. Over the past year, we have more than doubled our funding commitments. We now have offices in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam, and early next year we'll be in the Philippines too. Last month, the White House designated USTDA to lead the IPEF project preparation facility. This is important because we will receive additional resources and be able to create new tools to work with industry as we accelerate these infrastructure project development projects in eligible IPEF countries. Thirdly, the PEC also made a recommendation regarding our global procurement initiative, which, as I think you all identified, helps to level the playing field for U.S. suppliers in global tenders. Worldwide, just wanted to point out we have 16 countries already in that partnership. We work to build that partnership out through various commitments with those countries and others that are interested in working with us. And next year, we anticipate new public procurement training activities in Nepal and 7 Pacific Island economies. Lastly, Secretary Raimondo mentioned a trip to Manila. I want to make sure that you add to that itinerary the Indo-Pacific Business Forum that we are producing in Manila in March. This is the U.S. government's premier event for promoting trade, investment, and economic cooperation with the region. We are delighted to partner on this event with our colleagues at Commerce and also at State, and of course the government of the Philippines. So if we don't see you at COP, we'll see you in Manila, and thank you very much for your recommendations. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ellie. So at around 10:16, Gina totally jinxed me and said, you're running totally on time, and it's so impressive. So that's, anyways, no. So, but it's been a fantastic discussion across all these recommendations. And in closing, we'll get very brief 1-minute remarks. I'd like to first call on Paul Ledesina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make 2 very brief points, and I think in enthusiastically endorsing the 3 recommendations, I think it's important to note that they not only will help boost exports and strengthen the U.S. economy, but also make the U.S. a more attractive investment destination. And we already see this in what's happening in reshoring, friendshoring. Our own Kearney 2023 Reshoring Index, for example, shows that 96% of CEOs say that they either have reshored or are in the process of reshoring jobs under consideration. That compares to just 78% in 2022. So there's a dramatic increase in this attractiveness of the U.S. as a place to invest and to establish new job opportunities. Also, I think by offering incentives and fostering innovations in climate, agricultural, and manufacturing, it could further enhance the U.S. attractiveness as a foreign direct investment destination. Our own FDI Confidence Index shows that the U.S. has maintained first-place ranking for 11 consecutive years as the most attractive destination for foreign direct investment. And I think what we've recommended here today will only enhance the attractiveness of the U.S. as an investment destination. And then finally, I think there are many other ways that the recommendations that we have put on the table here today and adopted will see tangible and transformative results. For example, just on e-waste recycling, we estimate that the economic returns of this particular initiative could be valued at over $62 billion a year if adopted at scale. So by taking the kind of leadership that we have recommended in these recommendations, we think we not only will further enhance exports, further attract U.S. Investment to the United States, but also further establish the U.S. as a place for jobs of the future. Thank you.
Well said, Paul. Thank you for that summary. Lastly, I'd like to recognize Owen Hernstedt from Exim.
Thank you very much. I realize we're under a time crunch, so I will speak very quickly, and I will apologize in advance if I leave out some nouns and verbs on that. The United States Export-Import Bank is working hard to, as the recommendations state, to ensure that the future is built here at home. For those of you that don't know, Exim's mission is to support U.S. exporters that support U.S. jobs, plain and simple. We achieve this by providing financing to support the export of U.S.-made goods and services in the form of direct loans, loan guarantees, and insurance products backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. We fill gaps left by private financing vehicles. Exim has many tools to help companies in the U.S. and U.S. workers to compete globally. In terms of climate efforts, Exim went from $11 million the first year of the administration to over $1 billion today, including solar projects in Angola, estimated to support 1,600 U.S. jobs. Another tool involves Exim's Make More in America initiative, which is designed to unlock financing for American manufacturing and jobs and assist in bringing home supply chains, including those related to critical minerals, semiconductors, and advanced technologies that support American jobs. The initiative makes Exim's existing medium and long-term loans and loan guarantees available for export-oriented domestic manufacturing projects and is part of the Biden-Harris administration's whole-of-government approach referenced in the President's Executive Order 14017. MMIA can assist the U.S. to compete globally with advanced technologies that will lead us to a green, sustainable future supported by U.S. workers. And in 10 more seconds, a few days ago, the White House announced the Exim's Board of Directors approved its second transaction, authorized under Exim's Make More in America initiative for a direct loan for $169 million to Beta Technologies, an aerospace manufacturing company with a final assembly of the company's net zero, all-electric powered aircraft at its Burlington, Vermont facility. It is estimated to support 400 clean energy jobs in Vermont. Thank you for all of your recommendations, and thank you very much for the time.
Yeah, thank you for those remarks. And obviously, Exim is critical to the work we're doing, so we look forward to working closely together. As we wrap this up, I just was commenting to Gina that one of the joys of being able to do this work is to work so closely with people in government at all levels. And today, hearing from the leaders of the agencies and departments that we work with, it's really inspiring and confidence-inspiring to hear from all of you and really impressive. So thank you all for your contributions today. It makes us all feel really good that our government's in good hands. And with that,
thank you. Well, thank you, Mark. Excellent meeting. Efficient, effective. Happy holidays. Thank you for your commitment. We got to stick with it. We are second meeting, better than the first. Third will be better than the second. This stuff takes time. We have so many initiatives in train. So thank you. And let's stick with it so we have the impact we all need to have. Thank you.
Hold on. Wait, one sec. Not quite. Two less. Roz?
Just briefly, a lot of great comments today, but I hope everyone takes away some common messages here. We heard a lot about exporting innovation, the integration of technology and digital trade, and then also, too, the work that we can do between private and public partnerships. So let's keep it moving. Mark and I will make sure we be successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Roz. And finally, I just want to thank, there's too many people to thank, but I want to particularly thank Marissa and Tricia. If you're the Steph Curry of AI, they are the Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen of the PEC. I don't know who's who, but they're an incredible team, and we truly could not do any of this without Marissa and Tricia, so thank you. And as we look forward to next year, we're looking forward to the trip. The plan is to have a meeting in May, so we have ample time after that to make recommendations. That'll give us time to at least have one, if not two more meetings next year, where we can take on new subjects and make sure we properly follow up on the ones that we've started this year. This really is all about having a tangible impact. We're all committed to that. We've done a lot this year. We're looking forward to next. I'll echo Gina's comments, just wishing everyone a happy holidays and a terrific new year. So thank you for being here. The meeting is adjourned.